All the rest of the class is arriving. That's all right. I'll start a minute or two early with a couple of items of instruction so that I don't use much of our presenters' time today. I just wanted to show you in Canvas that these items, for those, we've had several people add this class. They must have heard about Mr. Olsen's presentation because they've added the class to your schedule. I've got a bunch of you actually that I've noticed. So we're glad you're with us. Before week one, we did that last week. We're now on week one. This is really the third week of the semester, but this is week one, meaning presenter one of the semester. And presenter discussion instructions are right here. Then you will, after the class is over, be starting with a discussion thread there. Let me know that you posted in the discussion. Do the extra credit if you wish. Pretty straightforward. The attendance, the little green papers that you have. If you don't have one of the little green attendance papers, you need one. Everybody can get one. They'll be a different color each week. We will be using the photos of this room to confirm attendance, but basically allowing you to report your own attendance. So you can see the little diagram. It looks like the room. You just look to the side of you and count how many seats you are in and mark what seat you're in and sign it. Try to write that legibly because we have to read it as well. The self-introduction and business idea assignment that was due on the 4th. Because of the number of people that have just added this class, I'm going to open that back up. So if you happen to forget it and miss it, you're in luck. You can find it right here before week one, introduction and business idea at the bottom of that module. Right now it's gray because it's expired, but after I extend that for a couple more days, it'll be due here this week. So you'll need to go in and do it, even if you're brand new in the class. And so watch for that. I would ask also that you silence cell phones during the presentation so that you can give your undivided and respectful attention to our guest who has, out of a very busy schedule, agreed to share his time with us today. And I will be introducing him, and then we'll hear from Mr. Milton Olsen. He grew up in Manta, Utah on a cattle ranch. He graduated from Snow College. And then he earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Utah State University and also pursued graduate work at the University of Cincinnati. In 1993, he founded IVC Services, which is a consultancy, and he operated that successfully for over a decade. And then, more recently, in response to market changes and needs that he observed, he founded another company called Maintenance Technology Systems. That was about 12 years ago, I believe. With his leadership, that company has developed a proprietary portable data collection system called VBox 3, and there's a series of those, and it is used in predictive maintenance efforts for sophisticated equipment in organizations worldwide. How would you like predictive maintenance systems to tell you when you're about to crash? Like this weekend, I was sick. I hope you all had a great Labor Day weekend, but I was sick. I guess I would have liked a little heads up. Hey, you're about to crash. You better do something about this. I probably got that, but I ignored it. I think that's kind of built into me, but I need to listen to it. But his equipment is used in maintenance efforts by organizations worldwide. He has done work for companies in 49 of the 50 states and in many countries throughout the world. Please welcome Mr. Milton Olsen.
Wow. Hello, everyone. Doesn't seem like it was that long ago when I was sitting in your seat here at Snow College. 1981, 83, 84, before you were all born. I understand how that works. But anyways, it's great to be with you here today. I've traveled all the way from Manti to be here, so that means I haven't gone too far out of my way. I brought my own little cheering section. Everybody wave at my cheering section down here. My wife's here, one of my biggest cheerleaders in this whole thing. At some point, I wondered whether she, when we got married, whether that was part of the deal that she was marrying an entrepreneur. I was barely learning how to spell engineer at that point, but I'm still not sure I've got this entrepreneur one spelled out properly. But, so 1984, graduated from Snow College, went on to Utah State, graduated from there in 1987, and went to work for Ford Motor Company, Cincinnati, Ohio, and ended up supervising a vibration testing program within the plant there. They made automatic transmissions for the F-Series pickup truck. And before I'd been there very long, I found myself in a position where all of a sudden I was developing a rather unique skill set and expertise. And that's kind of where I started this idea. I had a friend I bumped into there who had done some vibration consulting, and that was the first time I'd ever heard about doing that. And what vibration is used for on machines is to identify whether they're healthy or not. Well, you know, when you get sick, what happens? You get your temperature changes, you perhaps have some shakes and shivers, you're not feeling very well. Well, we kind of do the same thing with vibration on a machine. We identify those things, which is kind of where this started with me. After working at Ford Motor Company for about 3 years, I found myself assigned to work the afternoon shift as a maintenance supervisor. And that wasn't in my game plan. I wasn't ready to go down that path. And at that point, I left Ford Motor Company, went to work for a vibration company in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I was their director, manager, whatever you want to call it, of their vibration testing consulting services. What I didn't realize going in there was going to be a lot of fun. I was hoping for that, but I was traveling about 3 weeks a month doing that. And you say, well, you know, that's kind of how it goes. You know, you can't always work on the machines in your own backyard because they're probably healthy. It's the ones halfway around the world that aren't. And so that's where a lot of that traveling started. As you mentioned, I've hit 49 out of 50 states. Any of you from North Dakota, I have missed North Dakota so far. So I've talked to people who have been there and says I haven't missed very much. And so that remains to be seen, but it's probably true. And yet, at the same time, it's been really interesting because I've seen different kinds of machines doing different stuff all over the world. And that's been an interesting background for me. Just to give you an idea of where this all started, you know, I had that little introduction when I lived in Ohio about, well, there's a vibration consulting person out there doing that. And as I did some graduate work at the University of Cincinnati, I was interested in the vibration classes that they had. They had not quite enough for a master's degree. And I went there until I ran out of vibration classes to take, and then I said, okay, I'm done. They wanted me to take 2 or 3 more classes in like thermodynamics or heat transfer, and I'd almost already flunked out of those at Utah State, so I knew I didn't want to go back to that well and take another drink. So I got the specific information that I wanted. And a lot of other background came along with that. And much of what I do today, I learned back then and then didn't use for 20 years. Isn't that interesting? But I had that background, which allowed me to take a few steps. And so as I'm working at this company in Knoxville, Tennessee, I came home from work one night. My wife probably doesn't remember this, but I do. And I says, if this and this and this and this were to happen, a guy could start his own consulting business and make a go of it. And we had that conversation, and we kind of merrily went on my way, you know, back of the mind. It's almost like I put my order out to the universe. Because about 18 months later, guess what happened? I'm sitting there looking at that scenario that I described to my wife, and I'm thinking, whoa, is this a hard decision or an easy decision? You know, I quite enjoyed the company where I was working at. They were growing. I was like employee number 119 or something like that, and they were, you know, it almost doubled in size in the few years I'd been there. It was, you know, it was a fun place to work. I was kind of the designated Mormon there at the company amongst a bunch of Baptists. That was an interesting experience. But when I got to that point, Was it a hard decision to start my own business? My own consulting business? Seems like I was pretty young. That was 25 years ago, 1993, when I started my consulting business. And as I was trying to make that decision, as I boiled all this stuff down, it boiled down to one point. And that one question to answer was this: if I don't do this, I'll always wonder if I could have. That's an interesting question to answer, especially from an entrepreneurial perspective. And it was this: if I don't do this, I'll always wonder. And as I wrestled with that question, the answer was pretty obvious. I just need to take this step. If I wash out, if I don't make it, I can always go get another engineering job, right? Because engineers are one of those professions that people go looking for. So we were in Knoxville, Tennessee at the time. Turns out there were a lot, maybe a handful, and what I thought would be competition in the East Tennessee area. And so in all my great wisdom, I moved to Salt Lake City to start my own business. I've been kind of working that direction. But I had an ace up my sleeve. And that ace up my sleeve was I took my family and we moved into the basement of my in-laws. And there was only one way out, okay? And that was to make this business work. My father-in-law came home from work one day and he had with him a copy of the Deseret News, and he'd gone through the engineering section and highlighted all the jobs he thought I could do, okay? And this is about 6 months in. He just wasn't seeing progress. Well, about 9 months in, we bought another house, moved out of the in-laws' basement. So if you want to be successful in your business, what's the takeaway? Move into your in-laws' basement so you're determined to find a way out. Okay? And that was, back in about this time of year in 1998. So we went there from about December to September of that year, lived there. So that's where the consulting business started. And as things went on, the beginning of this business, it was more about, calling up maintenance managers saying, hey, I'm offering a vibration testing service. We called it predictive maintenance. You can predict when a machine will fail. Can I come talk to you about it? And, the response to cold calls is what? About 3 or 4% if you're good? Well, I was just learning, and I got a couple of yeses. And one of those yeses, I did a job for 3 weeks ago. So after 25 years, we've been doing work for these guys all along the way. And what happened is after about 1.5 to 2 years, I found I was so busy I didn't need to spend any time on the cold calls and the marketing stuff. Because what happens when you're good is there's this little advertising thing called word of mouth. And when you get that word of mouth going, interesting things happen. Okay? To the point where, as Alan mentioned, I've had the chance to travel to some interesting places. I usually go to the ugliest place in any country in many of the countries of the world, okay? For instance, in Chile, there's some copper mines in northern Chile. Guess what northern Chile is known for? It's the driest place on earth. The landscape around there I've termed moonscape. You've seen pictures of the moon? It's just dirt and rock. There's nothing growing because the rain's it's never seen water. And been to Mongolia, been to Africa. And it turns out there's machines there that need help. Turns out after living here in Utah, I've developed quite an expertise in the mining industry, which we're still living off of today as a company. So we developed an expertise. So let's take a look at a slide or two. This one is kind of an interesting one. This is entrepreneurship. You got this guy standing here on the edge of the cliff. He's got a box of parts for a plane, and he jumps off the cliff. Okay? What's the most important part here? The fact that he's got something in his box he's jumping off the cliff with. Okay? So remember that. So So as he's falling, he's putting this plane together, and before he hits the ground, what has he done? He's got that plane together, and he's smiling finally. Well, entrepreneurship is a lot like this. I've had this kind of experience in the last week. Last Wednesday afternoon, my phone rings. A guy I've known for a lot of years. He owns a large machine shop up in Salt Lake City. Says, Milt, we've got all these balancing machines. We want to use your box to do this with. And we talked about what his requirements were. And I talked about the fact that we had a two-plane balance was as far as we did. We didn't go to 3 or 4 or 5 planes. We just did up to 2. And I had that discussion with him, agreed to meet him yesterday. And I hung up the phone. And I'm sitting there thinking, uh-oh, I've always wanted a 2-plane balancing system. I've got the hardware. I'm lacking the software. I've got an idea of what needs to be done. We got any math majors here, mathematician guys that dare raise their hand? Math guys aren't very good entrepreneurs, just saying. So, anyways, to do the 2-plane balancing requires something called complex numbers. They have a real part and an imaginary part. And the last time I really had any exposure to that was when I was here at Snow College. And man, when I got through with that class, I was glad to move on. Because I just didn't understand it. But I had this idea that that's what would need to be done to do it. And so last Thursday, I started programming on this 2-plane balance job. Went through, got the program, tested along the way, created an application, and I started installing it on my data collector as I drove to the sales appointment yesterday. I was just north of Ephraim by the time it got installed on my data collector as I'm driving. And I felt like I just had one of those experiences. And it's exhilarating. I'm sure it's frustrating to my wife. I wasn't much help for the holiday weekend. I spent quite a bit of time in the office. And yet, entrepreneurship has those ups and those downs. So keep that in mind. And it's a scary thing to jump off the cliff sometimes. Other times you feel like you get pushed off the cliff. And other times you don't realize that you're falling and you got to do something. And that's one of the interesting challenges of being an entrepreneur, is you never know for sure where this meandering path that you're going down is going to be. So take a look at this one. In a very real sense, this is kind of where I started from the engineering perspective. We have an idea. We make sure we understand what's going on there. We do some preparation, and then we jump. And you think about one of those opportunities you have here at Snow College in this area of software engineering. For what I'm doing today, I should have at least minored in software engineering. Okay? And so your education, those things you're exposed to, will help you in this process. Many of you have probably heard that there's some big names of entrepreneurs that have built companies that never finished college, right? Bill Gates, guy that started Google, Oprah Winfrey, there's a whole list of them. Turns out that somewhere above 90% of those entrepreneurs that are successful start with a college education. So I think you need to let that one sink in just a little bit, because that's an important point to remember here. And as we go down this path of entrepreneurship, you kind of see where our plan is. It's a little bit uphill going up there. We've got our finish line up here. It's in the distance. And reality is, we're riding a bike. The hill's a lot steeper than we thought it is. It's a lot further across there than we thought it was. We've got some problems to solve along the way before we finally get to where we're going. And yet, if we'd have known this is what the journey is going to be, would we have even begun? I don't know, it's a good question. But if we recognize that there's going to be problems to solve, obstacles to overcome along the way, that's what makes a difference there. Okay? So, with that in mind, so I started the consulting business. We still do services work. Got a call from a guy I haven't talked to for 10 years yesterday. And he says, I'm going to have one of my reliability guys call you because we got a problem that you need to come help us with. It's up in Spokane, Washington at an aluminum processing plant where they process a large percentage of the aluminum that Boeing uses on their aircrafts. It's been 10 years since I've been there. So we still do this consulting services work. But about 12 years ago, my business partner and I got a business partner along the way, and that's been one of those things that's kind of kept things going. On the partnership side, just a note to the wise, make sure both partners are pretty honest, because in partnerships survive. If they're not, they don't. It's about that simple. But we're looking around saying, man, this data collector that we've been using, you know, he's got one, I've got one. We never go anywhere with two of them because we can't afford to. They're about $25,000, $30,000 a piece. And the unit I'm using, I purchased in 1994. Okay? So this is 2006, 12 years later. Should ask the guys videoing this back to the back of the room, you got anything back there that's 12 years old that you're using? You do? A few little things. This is our main thing, 12 years old, and our software was 10 years old. And we're thinking, man, we were riding a pretty good old horse, but the operative word here is old. We're thinking there's got to be a better way to do this. So we called up all the folks that we knew were competitors. They said, send us your latest unit. We want to kick the tires, do a test drive, because we're going to buy something. So over the next month to 6 weeks, we got these other guys' boxes that we haven't been using. Give you an idea. This is our data collector box. Similar kind of thing, probably a little bigger than this, a lot less capable than this. And we're looking at them saying, you know, all of these things are about 12-year-old technology. The one that was an upgrade from the one we had, the only difference was it went from a monochrome screen, you guys don't know what that is, to a color screen. Okay? That was the upgrade. And that was what was available. We're saying, man, this is the 21st century here. Why don't we have something that reflects some of the technology that's out there in these boxes? And so, you know, I had the harebrained idea that I could do it better. You know, us entrepreneurs have that kind of perspective, is that we can do things better or different or whatever that is that drives you. That's what happens, is we have this idea that we can make it better. So we did a little searching around, and you know, you look at those significant choices that you make in a business, and yeah, there was a decision we made back in 2006 when we didn't know anything about vibration data collection systems or programming for that matter. It had been 20 years since I sat in a programming class and had done programming. And that was at Utah State. It had been 20 years since I'd done programming. You know, I'm the last graduating class from Manti High School that learned how to use a slide ruler. Okay? So I graduated before there was a personal computer. I graduated before there was a cell phone or the internet. Thank Al Gore for that one, huh? And yet we have those opportunities to make decisions that put our feet on a path that we get a long ways down that path, we eventually come to one of two conclusions. One conclusion is that was a pretty good choice. And then the opposite conclusion, no, that was a bad decision. But it was a pretty good choice when I went looking for data collection systems. Because we ended up with a data acquisition card. I wasn't going to design a circuit board. That's the holy grail for electrical engineers. I'm not one of them. I've since designed my own circuit board for a couple little things we do. So I've had to kind of eat that thought. But what I did start down is the programming world. How many of you guys have done some computer programming? Got a few. Has that been a rewarding experience or a frustrating experience? When I graduated from Utah State, programming to me was a frustrating experience. Because you spend all this time and all this effort, and you got a little machine that goes, whoop, hello, I'm here, and that's it. And, you know, it lasts about 3 or 4 seconds, and you're done. And I'm thinking, man, that's... Well, there's only one of two ways to get that expertise. One is to go out and buy it. The other one is to build it in yourself. Well, I took the lower cost route. I went out and decided, well, I can be a programmer. And knowing what I know now, was that a good decision or not? It probably was. Here's the reason. If I'd had to continually pay someone to give me programming for our products, we wouldn't have been able to keep going the way we've kept going. Okay? So that's, you look for expertise, you look for specific, things that you need, and you've got to figure out, well, what's it going to cost me now versus what's it going to cost me later, and try and make the best decision that you can. So I went to a programming class in LabVIEW. It's a graphical programming language that works very well with data acquisition devices. So it was right in the, in the ballpark of where we wanted to be. And that programming class lasted for all of 4.5 days. Woohoo, kick you out, go to work, And it was either figure out how to do this and make it work, or not take this business and make it grow. And we started down that path in April of 2006. By about September, we had the basics of a vibration data collection system in place, and back in 2006, we didn't even know what big data was, and yet we were. I had a brother-in-law that helped some with our database development, and he says, "Do you guys realize you have 28 million points in your database?" I said, "Ooh, that sounds like a lot." We can go collect data for about 4 hours and put in about 40 million data points into our database now. We've improved on our ability to collect data. And that's kind of the world we live in. So, 2006, we started this. One of the things we did at that point was says, we're going to deal with a Windows tablet computer, 2006. So that was Windows XP era computer. Okay, we said we want to have, we had a whole list of features that we wanted in this thing. So we went looking for a computer that had those. Well, the one that came the closest was one by Motion Industries. It turns out they're out of Tennessee, which I thought was interesting. We had a gigabyte of RAM, had a 60 gigabyte hard drive, which was pretty big for then. We had 600 by 800 resolution on the screen, and we had about an hour and a half of battery life. And so with one of our very first prototypes we had going, guess what? I'm out at a limestone plant in Wendover. It's in July or so, and it's hot. It's about 102 or 3 degrees. And I've got about an hour's worth of data collection to go. About halfway through, I get a little warning that says, your computer is too hot. I'm shutting down. I knew it got hot, but didn't know it would get hot that fast. So I go back to the control room. Guess what I do with my data collector? My brand new, spanking new data collector that all of a sudden is shut down because it's hot. I throw it in the freezer, the refrigerator, sitting there in the control room. And sit down and talk to the operator for about 30 minutes while my data collector cools off so I go finish my job. So that's where we started down that path. About 4 or 5 years ago, probably about 4 years, good old Panasonic took our wish list of features, and guess what they did for us? They made a ToughPad computer that had about 97% of what we'd made up on our list about 10 years previous, or 8 years previous on that. Panasonic came through for us. Thank you, Panasonic. But interestingly enough, we kind of put our order out there and it eventually showed up. We knew that this technology could get there. So what have we got? We've got, this guy has probably a 512 gigabyte hard drive in it. It's got 8 gig of RAM. It's got more than a full HD display on it. I can go outside in the sunlight and I can mostly see what's on here. This gets dirty, I can stick it underneath running water and wash it off. I can drop this from 5 or 6 feet onto a concrete floor, and it's supposed to live. It's got dust ratings on it, for ingress on it, and a whole other list of things that we didn't even know we needed then are there. We have a camera on it. We can take pictures of where we put a transducer on the machine so we can come back and do it the same the next time. So these technology hurdles that we had to get over are being taken care of by another company. I don't have to develop those. All I have to do is get the software that makes it all work together. And after about 12 years, I've figured out how to do some pretty cool stuff with some software. And so, that's one of those expertises we pulled in. So, anyways, I'm going to step through about the next dozen slides. About 2 weeks ago, as I'm kind of kicking around some ideas of what I might share here today that might be meaningful to you, that you could, kind of put on your plate and go to work on. About 5:30 in the morning, inspiration comes. What are you supposed to do as an entrepreneur? You got to get it written down. And as I started on this little process, about 30 minutes later, I'm sitting here looking at what I've termed is 12 rules for entrepreneurs that I've used and been successful with for going on 25 years here. And I thought, well, maybe this is a takeaway. And so this is, kind of what came to me on a morning here just a couple of weeks ago. And we'll just kind of go through these. This is the part where, I've talked about a lot of things. Questions are certainly welcome. We've got about 20 minutes or so to finish up here. But I want to kind of go through these 12 things. We'll hit on some of them. We'll talk through some of them. If you've got any questions, raise your hand and let's talk. So here we go. Rule number 1. You got to have some passion in what you do. You've got to be excited about it. Because passion literally is the emotion that will fill your tank, and it will also inspire others. Okay? So think about what kind of passion you can associate with what you're doing. Because if you think about what the definition of a job is, it goes something like this. A job is where an employer pays you just enough so that you don't quit, and you work just hard enough so you don't get fired. Is that true? Okay? Without passion, that's where you end up. Okay? Next one. Expertise. If you don't have it, find it. Develop it. Go get it. If you need some expertise in today's world, you can figure out what that is. Case in point, I remember I talked about designing a circuit board. Well, I've got this little idea of we've got to have a circuit board to do this. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to go online and see if I can find some dude that can create this circuit board for me. About 10 minutes into that Google search, what did I find? Find a little website that says, download our software, design your circuit board, send it to us, we'll build it and ship it to you in 2 days. It says, well, that sounds kind of cool. And so I started designing a circuit board. What do you do? And I knew what I needed to have it do, so, we designed our own little circuit board. Okay? Where does college education usually lead? Some 90+% of successful entrepreneurs have a college education. They've either learned one of two things. One, they've developed an expertise that you can create a product over. Or two is they've learned that a college education really didn't take them where they wanted to go. And so it's like this one right here. Getting college education that doesn't lead anywhere is like buying concert VIP passes, front row tickets with a credit card to a free concert in the park. I believe that's true, guys. Because if your college education doesn't lead you to some place you want to go, you got to answer the question, why are you here? Okay? So make sure the time you spend here at Snow College and wherever this leads you takes you to a place you want to go. Okay? Commit to lifelong learning. As an entrepreneur, you got to be willing to learn. Whatever it is you need to know along the way, you got to be willing to learn. And it kind of comes in in waterfalls sometimes. You're drinking out of a fire hydrant, then you can walk into the desert for a while. But you got to be committed to learning, because if you take away from Snow College and wherever else you go an ability to learn what you need to know, you'll be pretty successful as you go through life, okay? Because this world is still changing. You know, I told you about I grew up without a cell phone and a personal computer. It's changed a lot since I was sitting where you're at. Okay, so think about that. The job I do now was not even a possibility when I was in high school. There was an inkling that there might be something like this when I was in college. But today it's pretty real. Okay? Last one. If you become the best needle threader in the world will be the path to your door. What that says is develop an expertise and figure out how to market it, because that expertise has value. Okay? Number 3, put your order out to the world. You know, I've kind of talked about that. Putting your order out there. What is it you want to do or need or have or whatever that is? You just put it out there. And it seems like that's one of the rules of the universe, is it eventually comes back. Sometimes it happens quickly, other times it doesn't. You've got to do it specific, with passion. Questions are important. Make a list of what you need and be satisfied with a percentage of that at this point and move forward. Don't let that stop you from going where you want to go. Next one. Call it debt versus patience in the survival of a new company. 70% of new companies make it a year. That's a pretty good number. 50% make it through 5. 30% make it through 10. I'm 12 years in on my second company. 25 on my first. Must be doing something right along here. One of those things I think we did right is that we didn't have any debt along the way. Stay out of debt. Because if you come to a slow time and you've got debt and payments to make, what happens? Nothing very pretty. Okay? The other thing you have to survive is your own incompetence. Okay? Recognize, factor that in, is that you don't know everything you need to know. Guess what? 25 years later, I still don't know everything I need to know. One of the things I've learned along the way, if you don't know something, find somebody else who does. And let them worry about it. And this is an interesting one I just found here in the last couple of weeks as I was kind of doing some research for this class, is that most companies that succeed past that 10-year mark have 2 founders. Why do you think that is? Yeah.
Because you have like 2 different points of view.
Yeah, 2 different points of view. That's part of it, yeah. Motivation. Motivation and accountability, right? Okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Separates the stress. Yeah, that's probably a good point as well. I hadn't thought about it in that perspective. What happens when you have 2 founders is you've got all these things you're talking about, but that other person has a different skill set than you do. At least that would be a hope. And as you start dividing up tasks, you can get those tasks assigned to the person with the most competence to do them, whatever that is. You say, wait a minute, I'm an entrepreneur, I want the whole pie to myself. Yeah, you'll have to make that, face that decision. But I'd rather have a half a pie that's this big than a whole one that's this. Okay? Find somebody to run the race with. That's what that one says. Okay, next point. Sales. If you can't sell something, where's your cash flow going to come from? That's a pretty good thought here, okay? So sales, we must build relationships of trust. You can't sell something to somebody if they don't trust you. You know, we have just a little product here. Our list price on this guy is about 19 grand. Okay? If somebody's going to buy this from us, there's got to be a little trust involved. Okay? So, building relationships of trust. Communicating. Less is usually better. A balance of underselling versus overselling. perhaps the most important point here, under promise and over deliver. A customer will never be disappointed with point number E there. Okay? Under promise and over deliver. We don't want it to be the other way around. We don't want to over promise and under deliver. Okay? Next point. Understand the technology trap. This is a hard one for us gearheads to stay out of. We want the newest, shiniest, most capable sort of thing now to start our business. If you're spending money on technology and not your business, you need just enough technology to do what you need to do, but you don't need the latest stuff. Now, I say all this, but don't come and look in my office. My son says my monitor is so big I need to wear sunblock to sit in front of it. Okay? When you do graphical program, you need screen real estate. I finally solved that problem about 3 or 4 months ago. 50-inch. 4K monitor will solve the screen real estate problem. There is no doubt in my mind. But did I need that 12 years ago when I started programming? Probably. Was it available? No. Could I have afforded it then? Probably not. That wouldn't have been the best place to spend $500. But for today's world it makes my life much, much better to have that 50-inch curved monitor. You sit in the right spot, all the lines come out straight. If you sit too far back, they're all crooked and weird. Okay? But don't get caught on that on the front end. Grow into that as time and need necessitates. Okay? You usually don't need the very latest technology, expensive technology to do what you need to do. Okay? Remember, we're doing this debt-free, right? Okay? Next point. Dream about it, talk about it, listen and learn. Okay? Only take advice from people who've done it. Okay? When you seek out advice, always measure the source. And perhaps most importantly, number C here, when advice shows up unsolicited, probably best to ignore it. If you want to make $1 million, you don't take advice from someone who's only ever made $50,000. You'll never get there. Okay? When you want to become a consultant, what's the best thing to do? Go find somebody that's already doing it and pick his brain. Tell him what you're doing. Chances are he'll still give you a brain dump, give you some ideas, some pointers. I had one of these guys in my life, a fellow by name Art Crawford. He died here about 3 or 4 years ago, ripe old age of 92 or 93. And interesting past. He grew up on a farm in Ohio, went to Ohio State, sat down with the dean of students and says, I'd like to sign up. As a 16-year-old kid, he says, I'd like to sign up for your most difficult course. What would that be? The dean of students says, well, that'd probably be studying nuclear physics under one Dr. Einstein. He says, okay, sign me up. Dean of students says, got one question for you. Why would you want to do that? You're 16. And he says, well, I think I'm a pretty smart kid. I'm 16. I got lots of time. If I start out with the most difficult course, I can flunk down to eventually to what I can handle. You like that attitude there? Well, he graduates with a master's degree in nuclear physics, worked on Einstein on the Manhattan Project. Kind of cool guy. But he ended up being my mentor for a number of years. That kind of kept me going, kept me pointed, kept me... When I had a question, I'd call him up and say, Art, got a couple questions, want to run by, and he most likely seen it or known somebody that had. So find a mentor, someone you can bounce some ideas off of. But make sure that you're getting some ideas from a source that has done it before. And Art had done this before in my case. Okay? With people, slow is fast. What do you think that means? With people, slow is fast. Yeah?
It means that, like when you're looking at it, you want everything to be done instantly, but with people, like, even if it's like you don't get something done for a week or 2 weeks, that's actually pretty fast.
Yeah, you're actually, you're hinting at what's going on here. Because if I want it done fast, who can do it the fastest? I can. But I can only do this much, right? Because I'm only one person. I only have 24 hours in a day. But if I'm working on that right now, been working on it for the last 4 or 5 years. Got a son over here that went through Snow College, and he went through business and ended up with a business degree from Utah State. He says, my goal is to take everything off your plate that I can do. That's kind of freed up a little time for me to do only what I can do, right? That was an extremely wise move on his part. Now, what can I still do as the guy that knows it all here? Well, I'm the only programmer in our company right now. And so last week, Tuesday and Wednesday, I've got a guy that's a computer science major who understands vibration and the benefits of what we do, from Logan, came down and spent 2 days with me. And in those 2 days, we probably wrote the basics of a program that I could have probably done in several hours, 3 or 4 hours. And it took us 2 days. And now he's working on it, trying to finish up what I could have done in 3 or 4 hours, and now we're over a week into this. But what am I doing? I'm with people that's slow. I'm teaching him and helping him come along to a point where he can be his own guy. And now instead of one programmer in the company, we'll have 2. And what will that do to our company? It'll make a lot of difference. I can promise you that one. It'll make a lot of difference. So remember that one. With people, it's slow. But we have to remember that's the fast route. You have to bring some others along. You know who the biggest bottleneck in my company is to growth and doing what I want to do? It's me. And that's almost always the case with an entrepreneur. The biggest bottleneck is you. I used to tell my wife, I says, if I ever got an employee, this would turn into a job. Remember that? And I've had to change that thinking. That was some wrong thinking on my part. Because if I don't have other people around me doing stuff, my business won't grow the way it could. And I've learned that the hard way. Okay? Lastly, hire smart people. I think this comes from Steve Jobs. He says, don't tell them what to do, let them tell you what to do. Okay? Think about that. Okay? Stick to the knitting. No distractions. Us guys, we have a problem with squirrels and shiny objects. And entrepreneurs are probably the worst. When you got something that's working, look at, don't go down these paths that take you other places. Because, whoops, pushed the wrong button. What? One more, maybe. There we go. So distractions dilute your effort. Distractions dilute your effort, your time. They take your attention, your time, your energy, your resources. So remember that. Don't bet the farm on the newest, greatest idea until you've thought long and hard and discussed it with your other folks about it. And there may be times when you want to bet the farm. I've got an idea that I'd like to bet the farm on, but I don't have cash flow to support it. Okay? So we stick to what we're currently capable of. Okay? Communicate your vision. Where do you want your company to go? Entrepreneurs, to be successful, must be effective communicators. Be visionary, determine, evaluate what your vision is. If your market's telling you to change, to tweak, to adjust, do it. Because that's what we call the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules in this business. Okay? Okay, thanks. Okay, remember that. A couple more to hit on. Being an entrepreneur is a job. Treat it like it is. Do something today. What are you going to do on Saturday? Be consistent in the time that you put into it. Roman philosopher Seneca said, luck is what happens when preparedness meets opportunity. You have to prepare. And the more prepared you are, the more the opportunities will find you. Okay? And then the last one. Nothing happens without marketing. And in today's world, a URL is better than a trademark, I promise you. Okay? Our product, we call it a VBox 3. Guess what I have URLs for? VBox 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You know, I want to make sure I've got them all covered. And that's better than going to the trademark office to get it. And I've got a patent here that helps. So, anyways, need to finish up here. Lastly, you must have a product that people need, want, and desire. If you can figure out what that is, you can be successful as an entrepreneur. So, any questions? Take a few here. If not, it's about time to be done. If you want to come up and talk to me afterward, I certainly invite you to do that. It's been great to be with you here today. Thank you.
We have a little thank you gift here
Whoa.
for Milton. We appreciate him coming to speak to all of us.